let's get over to the Caucasus, because that's why we're here today. We have to understand that the Caucasus acted as the buffer zone between what really amounted to the European West, and I'm going to include Russia in that, and the Persian and Turkish areas. You know, at one point an old Afghan man explained to me that there were 3 countries in the world: Inglesistan, Russistan, and Afghanistan. And you know, Russistan being land of the Rus, or basically the communist sphere, and Inglesistan being people who speak English, basically the West, I can kind of sort of understand that. But here, what we have is the Russians came down, took the northern part of the Caucasus, pushed in pretty securely, captured it about 1805. At this point, there was a small group of men who had come together with the idea of creating a protected homeland for the Armenian people. And these people, I actually came across, what led me down this path was I found the name Count and Lieutenant General Loris Melikov. And I went to one of my Russian experts. I said, tell me about the name Loris Melikov. He said, it's not Russian. And I went to some various people I knew who knew the area. They said, no, it's, you know, it's not Ukrainian, it's not this, it's not that. And, you know, they weren't sure. It didn't sound Armenian. And finally, I found a reference in a book. This man was the son of the last Malik of Lori. And so when you translate that into Russian, that comes out as son of the last Malik of Lori, or son of the Malik of Lori. Loris Melikov off would indicate being a son. Now, Count Loris Melikov ended up as one of the richest men in the world and hobnobbed with the British royalty. I think it was Prince Albert on the French Riviera later on. But he had a glorious career. These men, also General Lazarev, the Lazarev family over several generations. The Lazarevs are Lazarovs, and it's spelled different at different times in different ways. These men had great wealth. The Lazarev family had been the Maliks of Jolfa. Then when Shah Abbas pulled the Armenian people out of the Caucasus, their family ended up as the Maliks of New Jolfa across the river from Isfahan. Then, under Shah Abbas II, some unpleasant things happened between the Persians and the Armenians. There were some forced conversions to Islam, at which point many of the well-to-do Armenians pulled out of New Jolfa and moved to India. And it's interesting, I believe it's Harold who told me, that the oldest existing Armenian language newspaper is published in India. Anyway, these people ended up as the primary merchants and leaders of the Armenian community in India when they got recruited by Empress Catherine the Great to come back to Russia. Prince Lazarev, I believe the father, perhaps the grandfather of this man, established these steel works. They later, besides the steel works, were able to gain control of much of the Baku oil fields. So these people were among the super rich of the super rich. Anyway, they came up with the idea of bringing home the Armenian people. So Russia invades, pushes the Persians out of the northern Caucasus in 1805, suddenly into Georgia, into Karabakh, into many of these places. Armenians from all over Iran, present-day Iran, from Persia and Turkey, are flowing inwards. Then in 1828, they go back to war, and when the treaty was signed, I believe it was 50,000 gold crowns, or what, florins, whatever their coins. 50,000 gold crowns were designated to help the Armenians move back into the Caucasus and settle. This is data which is from a book by Professor George Bornutian of Iona University. Professor Bornutian has been a great help to me. Any mistakes I made are surely my own. Anything that sounds really good I probably borrowed from somebody else. A lot of it from Bornutian or Kashishian or a handful of other guys who have really been a godsend to me on this project. But here we have, the Russians wanted to know, they captured Yerevan. Yerevan was the seat of one of the Qajar families, not the same Qajars who were the Shahs, they're cousins. But this land had been given to the Qajars by Shah Ismail, the first Safavid. They were given as Qizilbash. The Qizilbash Qajar overthrew the Turkmen Qajar, who had been part of the Karakoyunlu tribe. And they received, as their reward for supporting the Safavids, they received Yerevan. So now, when the Russians came in, they went back through the Persian tax records, and they conducted a census of their own, and they put this all together in the, and my pronunciation is terrible on these things, but what would that be? Kameranoi Opasani? Anyway, what struck me in here, I live my life through pithy truisms. I create laws that sort of govern my life, and I constantly test these laws, and then either they hold up or they don't. Now, O'Connell's first great law of Oriental rugs, when you're trying to figure out who they are, the first great law of Oriental rugs is somebody had to weave them. You know, they didn't fall from the sky. So now that we know that somebody had to weave them, let's go to the next part. O'Connell's second great law of Oriental rugs, it was probably the people who lived there. So, if we go now and we're looking, you know, when the Russians came in and the Persians had fled, 1/3 of the villages in Yerevan province were empty. The people had pulled up and gone out. Where did these people go? They went down the caravan route. They went on either down the western route through Tabriz, or they went down through the eastern route through Michigan. Many of them ended up in places like Zanjan. When the Qajar family pulled out of Yerevan, they're still the cousins of the Shah, so they did okay. They pulled out after the loss, and they ended up in the town of Zanjan. And if we take a look, every building of note in Zanjan dates to about 1828 to 1835. The mosque, the caravanserai, the major buildings all date to the same period, because now we have an extremely wealthy family moving down. So 1/3 of the villages in Yerevan are depopulated entirely. That's not to say that there were other villages where some people left. We had a massive outflow of the people, of the Muslims who lived, who were primarily of the Turkmen Azeri group. Well, let me tell you another one of my, and this will help frame things a little bit. Perhaps the best source of information on the ethnolinguistic groups of the world is a group called Summers Institute of Linguistics in Austin, Texas. Summers Institute of Linguistics publishes the Ethnologue database, and they have the most detailed information on the 5,000 known languages spoken on the face of the planet Earth. And they keep extremely accurate records of who speaks what and also what languages they speak. Now the question is, why do they spend so much time on it? Well, the other half, the back door of Summers Institute of Linguistics, is something called Wycliffe Bible Translators. And all the major Protestant bodies got together and backed Wycliffe, and their goal is to collect information from missionaries and translate the Bible into every language spoken on earth. So consequently, they have the most detailed. And when you figure you have an educated person going in as a missionary who's risking their life for what they believe in, and they're told it's important to get information on what languages are spoken, these people have the very best sources that I know of anywhere. So I've used their work extensively.